guitar I've ever played. Just got a good sound.
Every day, I share another story from the Golden Age and the moments that shaped an unforgettable era. If you'd like to keep these memories alive with me, hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. Willie Nelson has lived a life so wild, it could fill more than one lifetime. At 91, he survived it all: financial ruin, betrayal from people he trusted, narcotics busts, and even being blacklisted by the very industry he helped shape. Yet somehow, he turned all that chaos into legend, carving out his throne as one of country music's true kings. His story isn't just about fame, it's packed with drama, controversy, secret affairs, and explosive feuds with Nashville's so-called elite. Now, as Willie looks back at the people who molded his journey, one name refuses to fade: Kris Kristofferson. For decades, whispers have floated around about their strange bond. Were they rivals or brothers in arms? Was jealousy ever at play? Or did competition quietly eat away at their friendship behind the scenes? Fans have long wondered how two icons of the same outlaw movement could sometimes seem so close, yet suddenly drift apart. Let's dig into how this all began. Willie and Kris didn't just make country music, they rebelled against it. Back in the late 1960s, Nashville ran the scene like a dictatorship. Every note, every lyric, every outfit was controlled. Artists had to fit the clean-cut image: polished hair, tidy suits, and lyrics about small-town heartbreak and drinking. The Grand Ole Opry and radio execs acted like gatekeepers, deciding who was country enough. And anyone daring to step out of line was tossed aside without a second thought. But Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson, they weren't built for rules. Willie had already been fighting the system for years. He came to Nashville in the late 1950s dreaming of being a performer, but ended up stuck in the shadows as a songwriter. He penned hits like Crazy for Patsy Cline and Hello Walls for Farron Young, but his own music kept getting ignored. The execs didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't slick like Hank Snow or heartthrob material like the label wanted. His voice was raw, his delivery offbeat, and his ideas were too bold for the traditional crowd. Kristofferson, though, was a whole different kind of rebel, a decorated war hero turned poet, a Rhodes Scholar who could have had it all. Yet he traded that life to mop floors at Columbia Studios just to get close to the sound he loved. His songs weren't the usual country fluff. They were deep, full of pain, guilt, and the weight of being human. Too heavy for radio, too real for the system, and that made him dangerous in Nashville's eyes. While others sang about drinking and cheating, Kris wrote about what people actually felt: regret, loneliness, and the kind of struggles most folks kept buried inside. Both men were too unpredictable for Nashville's safe formula. But Kris finally caught his big break in 1970, and what a stunt it was. He literally stole a National Guard helicopter and landed it on Johnny Cash's lawn just to hand him a demo of Sunday Morning Coming Down. Cash loved it, performed it live, and boom, Kris became an overnight sensation. The same industry that once laughed at him was suddenly desperate to cash in on his success. Meanwhile, Willie was still trapped. His label RCA kept forcing him into stiff suits and tidy hair, trying to make him fit the Nashville man image. But behind that clean look, Willie was ready to break free. And soon, the world would see what happens when two rebels like him and Kris refuse to play by anyone's rules. Nashville tried to tame Willie Nelson, and it backfired. They drowned his natural sound under fancy orchestral layers, turning him into something he simply wasn't. His albums were tanking, his confidence was fading, and even though he was one of the best songwriters in town, he was ready to walk away from music completely. That's when Kris Kristofferson stepped in, now rising in fame himself, and saw the raw power that Nashville was wasting in Willie. Kris knew the truth. The Nashville machine would never understand someone like Willie Nelson, so he told him straight up to pack his bags and head to Texas, where something real was happening. Down there, country music was starting to sound gritty again, full of edge, honesty, and heart. In cities like Austin and Luckenbach, the bars were alive with long-haired cowboys, bikers, and hippies who wanted music that actually meant something. That advice changed Willie's life. He rolled the dice, left Nashville behind, and landed in Austin, a city that embraced him instantly. He stopped pretending to fit in, grew his hair wild, let his beard run free, and dropped the suits for jeans and bandanas. The crowds didn't care if he had a radio hit or not. They loved his truth, his style, his soul. Texas gave him the freedom he'd been begging for all those years. In Austin, Willie Nelson became reborn, no longer a forgotten songwriter, but a movement all on his own. He and Kristofferson weren't just two outsiders anymore. They had become leaders of the outlaw country revolution. They ripped up Nashville's rulebook and showed the world that country could be rebellious, raw, and unapologetically real. By the time the 1970s hit full swing, the outlaw movement was on fire. And Willie and Kris were right in the middle of it. But behind the fame and friendship, there were whispers. Quiet rumors that Willie might have been jealous of Kris. People in the scene couldn't stop talking, saying the two icons were locked in some secret rivalry. In country music, competition was part of the game. Every artist fighting for the same spotlight, radio time, and loyal fans. Yet for Willie and Kris, the tension wasn't built on hate. It came from timing, frustration, and the cruel feeling of being overlooked. Kris Kristofferson was the golden boy, the poet with brains, heart, and looks that made success look effortless. He could move from songwriting to literature to Hollywood without breaking a sweat. The critics adored him, the industry respected him, and he was exactly the kind of artist Nashville loved to show off. Someone with both credibility and mainstream charm. Even when his lyrics got heavy or unconventional, the big names still treated him like royalty. Meanwhile, Willie was fighting tooth and nail just to be seen as more than a background figure. He had written massive hits, yet the suits in Nashville still boxed him in as just a songwriter, not a star. Every label tried to mold him into a clean-cut, radio-safe image, but that was never who he was. Every small victory felt stolen, and every step forward came with a shove backward. It was exhausting. Kris, on the other hand, was unstoppable. He was scooping up Grammys, performing on national TV, and breaking into Hollywood like it was nothing. By the mid-70s, he was starring in the 1976 blockbuster A Star is Born alongside Barbra Streisand, living proof that a country artist could conquer the big screen too. Watching all this unfold, Willie had to wonder when his own moment would arrive. For years, Kris had everything Willie wanted: respect, awards, and freedom to do it all his own way. Back then, Nashville still refused to see Willie Nelson as anything more than a songwriter, the guy who wrote hits for other stars to shine with. But that all changed in 1973, when Willie finally snapped the chains and took full control of his career. He left the polished Nashville scene behind, went home to Texas, and decided to show the world exactly who he really was: raw, fearless, and impossible to tame. He grew out his now famous long hair and beard, tossed the suits in the trash, and dropped Shotgun Willie, the album that flipped country music upside down. With Shotgun Willie, he wasn't trying to please record executives anymore. He was building his own empire. The moment it hit, fans knew something had shifted. Willie Nelson wasn't just another name on the charts. He was a movement, a storm that Nashville couldn't control. From that point on, Willie stopped playing by anyone's rules. He wasn't a songwriter for hire anymore. He was a force of nature, unstoppable and untouchable. And the wildest twist? The tables turned fast. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Willie Nelson was the biggest name in the game. Stadiums were packed, albums were flying off shelves, and suddenly the rebel everyone ignored had become the leader of the entire outlaw movement. But not everyone was celebrating. Whispers started flying that Kris Kristofferson might have been jealous. Some said the shift in fame hit hard. The industry that once crowned Kris as country's intellectual hero was now obsessed with Willie's every move. Hollywood, media, fans, all eyes were on Willie Nelson now. For the first time, Kris wasn't the center of attention, and that didn't sit easy with everyone. As Willie's career exploded, Kris's path started to twist, his music stopped hitting the charts the way it used to, and his acting gigs became unpredictable. The man who once ruled both Nashville and Hollywood was suddenly struggling to keep his footing. Behind the scenes, his demons were creeping back in. The heavy drinking, the failed relationships, and a reputation for being hard to work with. It all started catching up to him fast. But what really shook their friendship wasn't just fame, it was a woman. The love triangle that nearly broke everything apart. Few people know this part of the story, but both Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson were connected to the same woman, Rita Coolidge. Rita wasn't just talented, she was mesmerizing. A powerhouse singer and songwriter with a voice that could stop anyone in their tracks. She had worked with legends like Eric Clapton and Leon Russell, but her allure went far beyond music. There was something magnetic about her energy, the kind of spark that drew people in instantly. Among those drawn to her were none other than Willie and Kris, two outlaw icons caught in the same orbit. In 1973, Rita married Kris Kristofferson, and from the outside, they looked like a perfect pair. fiery, romantic, and unstoppable. But behind closed doors, their love burned too hot. Their marriage was full of passion, but also jealousy, wild arguments, and heartbreak that came with fame and temptation. Kris, known for his hard living and unpredictable streak, was deeply in love with Rita, but struggled to balance marriage and the chaos of celebrity life. Before she ever became Mrs. Kristofferson, though, there were whispers that Rita and Willie might have shared something real. Neither of them ever confirmed it, but insiders in the industry couldn't stop talking. Rumor had it they shared a brief, meaningful connection before Kris entered the picture, something that could have easily planted seeds of tension. No one really knows how far it went, but it was enough to keep people talking. And considering Kris's fiery nature, it's easy to imagine how that kind of suspicion could linger. Between fame, ego, and love, it was a cocktail for trouble. And it left a crack in the brotherhood between Willie and Kris that would take years to fade. Rita Coolidge became the center of Kris Kristofferson's universe, but their love was far from peaceful. He was a man of extremes, swinging between deep affection and explosive emotion. Coolidge would later admit in interviews that their relationship, while passionate, was drenched in chaos, jealousy, and endless attempts to fix what kept breaking. It was the kind of love that burned bright and burned out fast. Willie Nelson, on the other hand, had seen his fair share of love and heartbreak. He'd loved many women, lost many too, but he never let it turn bitter. Whether his connection with Coolidge was a quick spark or simply a deep friendship, Willie refused to feed into the gossip. But that didn't mean Kris wasn't shaken by it. Far from it. Insiders whispered that tension between the two men sometimes boiled under the surface, especially when Rita was nearby. It wasn't exactly a secret that Kris could be jealous when it came to the women he loved. Some people close to them said that whenever Rita entered the room, the air got heavy. Unspoken tension, side glances, and that quiet sense that something had once happened. Still, both men stayed classy in public, never throwing shade or letting things get ugly. But behind the scenes, that unspoken rivalry had left a mark that neither of them could fully ignore. By 1980, the marriage between Kris and Rita had crumbled for good. What started as passion and poetry ended in heartbreak and exhaustion. Rita later looked back on their relationship with bittersweet honesty. She adored his spirit, but couldn't survive his chaos. She said his self-destructive ways made love feel like a losing battle. And Kris himself would one day admit that losing Rita was one of the biggest regrets of his life. But by then, his stardom had already started to fade, the golden glow of his career slowly dimming. Meanwhile, Willie Nelson was on a completely different path. He was transforming into one of the biggest names in all of music, not just country. His fame was explosive, his tours massive, and the outlaw image he built was becoming legendary. While Kris's star flickered, Willie's burned hotter than ever. And so people asked, did the whole love triangle with Rita leave a permanent scar between them? No one can say for sure, but there's no doubt both men were deeply changed by her presence. Kris carried the pain of heartbreak, while Willie carried the memory of whatever connection they'd once shared. Their friendship lived on, but something between them was never quite the same. Rita Coolidge's name lingered like a shadow in both of their stories. Beautiful, haunting, unforgettable. And as their love lives shifted, so did their careers, leading them into two very different battles. Kris Kristofferson was about to face the hardest chapter of his life. While Willie was standing on top of the world, selling out arenas and breaking records, Kris was slipping into a fight with his own demons. The headlines started to change. Willie Nelson's tax fraud, drug busts, and affairs versus Kris Kristofferson's alcohol addiction and Hollywood burnout. Both men were living in chaos, but their storms looked very different. Willie's downfall came from the people he trusted, shady financial managers who led him straight into one of the biggest tax messes in music history. His laid-back attitude and rules don't apply to me lifestyle made him a hero to fans, but a target for the government. While folks saw him as the cool outlaw with a guitar, the IRS saw something very different. Unpaid taxes and bad deals stacking up fast. Before long, the feds were at his door, and his name was splashed across headlines everywhere. Kris's battle wasn't about money, it was about survival. His drinking got out of control, his relationships fell apart, and his reputation as a difficult star made directors hesitant to cast him. The same fire that once made him magnetic was now burning him from the inside out. He was still respected, still a legend, but life had gotten heavy, and it showed. Willie's chaos wasn't quiet either. Beyond the tax problems and drug charges, his love life was its own headline machine. He married multiple times, had more than a few affairs, and his personal life often felt like one big rodeo of emotion. Fans adored him for being real, but behind that charm was a man constantly juggling fame, freedom, and fallout. Both Willie and Kris were legends, but by this point, the lines between triumph and trouble had blurred beyond recognition. Willie Nelson never hid the wild parts of his life, but that freedom often came with public scandals and messy family drama. Yet through it all, he never let it crush him. Instead, he turned chaos into fuel, pouring it into his music, cracking jokes, and simply outlasting every problem that came his way. In 1990, Willie faced one of the biggest challenges of his life. The IRS seized nearly everything he owned. They claimed he owed a jaw-dropping $16.7 million in unpaid taxes, one of the largest tax debts ever imposed on a musician. They took his ranch, his recording studios, his properties, and even some of his most treasured guitars practically overnight. It was a nightmare most people couldn't survive. The crazy part? This financial disaster wasn't because Willie was reckless. It was bad advice from his accountants. His firm, Pricewaterhouse, had invested his earnings in a tax shelter that the IRS later declared illegal. Suddenly, not only did he owe millions in back taxes, but penalties and interest pushed the total to nearly $17 million. By the time he realized the mess, the IRS wasn't interested in compromise. They wanted their money, no questions asked. Most people would have folded and filed for bankruptcy, but Willie Nelson isn't most people. He did something only he could do, and he turned the IRS fiasco into art. Teaming up with his daughter Lana, he recorded a stripped-down acoustic album called The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories. Every penny from the album went straight to the IRS. Released in 1992 through a late-night infomercial, it was unconventional, wild, and it worked. Fans snapped it up, rallying behind their favorite outlaw. But while Willie was battling the IRS, his personal life was spinning out of control. Free Spirited doesn't even begin to cover it. Willie openly admitted monogamy wasn't his strong suit. He cheated on multiple wives and fathered children outside of marriage, often keeping affairs secret until they were revealed in shocking ways. One of the most infamous moments came with his second wife, Shirley Colley. She discovered a hospital bill for a baby that wasn't hers. Confronting Willie, he admitted the affair. The child was Paula Carlene Nelson, born to Connie Kiki, a woman he had been seeing behind Shirley's back. That revelation destroyed their marriage instantly. Even after marrying Connie, Willie couldn't stay faithful. Their relationship eventually ended too. Willie admitted in interviews, "Let's just say I had a hard time saying no." He wasn't wired for a traditional marriage, and he never pretended to be. Beyond fidelity, Willie's love for marijuana became another defining part of his image. Arrests for possession made headlines across Texas, Louisiana, and North Carolina. In 1974, 1994, and 2010, with authorities treating him like a public example. Yet Willie embraced it instead of hiding, turning another controversy into part of his legend. Through all the drama, Willie never forgot the impact Kris Kristofferson had on him. Reflecting on their decades-long friendship, he's spoken openly about how much Kris shaped his life and music. Together, they created a bond and a body of work that defied the Nashville system and changed country music forever. Their collaboration wasn't just music, it was a statement, a rebellion, and a true friendship forged under fire. Willie Nelson continues to carry that legacy today, making sure their work stays alive for generations. Their story isn't just about fame or scandal, it's about resilience, loyalty, and the courage to break every rule in the book. Willie and Kris didn't just create music, they redefined an entire genre, and their legacy will stand among the greatest in country music history. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you felt something real, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.